This podcast is brought to you by Podspot Events.
Anxious, avoidant, ghosting, gaslighting, getting the ick, and red flags. These are just some of the terms used today in modern dating and modern relationships. Joining me in this episode to unpack the complex world of modern dating is Nick Slater. Nick is an actor, content creator, and podcaster, and is well known for his funny but sometimes very confronting skits on modern dating. In this episode, we talk about Nick hitting rock bottom after cheating on his ex-girlfriend. We talk about attachment styles, and I ask Nick why people resort to ghosting and gaslighting. I'd like to thank Nick for being so open and honest in this episode, and if you haven't already, I'd really encourage you to check out Nick's stuff on Instagram. This episode is sponsored by Remoti and Chief Nutrition, but I'll tell you a bit more about the both of them later. As always, remember to give us a follow on Instagram at The Bondi Podcast to stay up to date with all of our guests and episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll find all of our episodes on Spotify. Cheers! Nick, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thank you, Chris, mate. It's a pleasure to be here. I love the pod. I love what you're doing for the community. It's a really great way to bring everyone together, and I've listened to a bunch of episodes. I'm in esteemed company, so thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, mate. No, thanks for the kind words. It's a pleasure having you here. Well, if you've listened to a few episodes, you know the first question that I ask all the guests. What is your favorite thing about Bondi?
Yeah, so for me, I grew up in Brisbane. So when I was growing up, the closest beach was at least an hour's drive away. I'd finish work when I was 20, working in the city, and the first thing I'd do was just scoot down the highway to get to the beach. When I was 21, I came down here to visit my mate, and he was living at Tama, overlooking the beach. Shithole place, but the view and his proximity to the city was ridiculous. I just could not believe that he could be at his desk and then half an hour away from the beach for a swim after work. And it's not just any beach. It's a beautiful world-class beach with waves. So to see that when I was 21 completely blew my mind. And that planted a seed for me to try and move down here as soon as possible. So it took a few more years, but once I did, it still just blows my mind how you can have such an incredible beach and hub in such close proximity to a major city. So, but that's number one, just how you can have that kind of beach. But number two is probably, and everyone talks about the energy of Bondi, but it's how when you go down to the beach in the morning at 6 a.m. and everyone's active, everyone's fit, everyone's swimming, there's run clubs, that energy really rubs off on you. So I don't think anyone can go down there in the morning and not be inspired by that. It really changes your behavior as well. And collectively, everyone as a group kind of rises together. And I've had mates who've lived here, then they moved back to Brisbane and they let themselves go a little bit. And it's because they're not in a community which is so health focused. So that's a really, really important thing for me.
So what was it then that brought you down here in the first place? You said it took like a couple of years to come down. What was it that actually?
Yeah, it took me a few years. So I was working in Brisbane. My first job out of school was as an audio producer for radio. So I was working at Nova in Brizzy, and it was the best job ever. I got to sit in a studio and make jingles and skits that would be played on air. I was helping a breakfast team at the time, who were still on air actually, Ash, Kip and Lutzi. So it was a dream job for me. It meant that I could be creative and sort of embellish in the music side of things. And I was lucky enough to get poached by the Melbourne team. So I went down to Melbourne and I was down there for a year. And then eventually they moved me to Sydney. And then I was on the national night show here, which is still on air, called Smallsy Surgery, which is a really exciting show because it was all pop music, all celebrity culture. And as a 24-year-old or 25-year-old at the time, it was really exciting for me. So that was the switch that brought me to Sydney.
And you've always been eastern suburbs?
Yes. I did what everyone did and looked at the map when you moved to Sydney and go, okay, what's the closest to the city? I'll try Potts Point. So I did probably a year in Potts Point, but I was just commuting to the beach every day after work anyway. So eventually it made sense to be in Bondi. And I've been here for more or less 10 years since then.
In Bondi? Wow. How's it changed over those 10 years now?
You know, I think you look at things like Hall Street and you just see how it seems pretty rapidly these days, gentrifying, just with really nice apartment blocks. And it's definitely become, I guess with that development, it's become a bit more high end in that time.
I think it's losing a bit of its character and
Do you
soul,
think?
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I guess, with those properties prices coming in and the way everything's going nuts, rental prices are going nuts. It's only going to squeeze people out of the suburb. So with that, you lose the youth who have the culture. They're the ones going out. They're the fun ones who are still, having fun with their life. So I guess if they're getting squeezed out of the suburb, it does lose a bit of its culture. Bit sad.
Maybe it leads on to the next question quite nicely. So one of the things I've introduced more recently is obviously asking that question at the start, but asking guests what they would change about Bondi. What would you
Yeah, it's a
change?
good one. I'd probably say it's the flip side of the very health conscious community that we have. So whilst that's extremely positive, I guess there is an element to that which people can become hyper competitive. So, when you go down the beach and you see beautiful, ripped people in their 20s, there is obviously a part of you that's going to compare yourself to people. And I think it can be it can be more impactful for women, maybe. I know my girlfriend Zoe, she's beautiful, but she'll go down there and compare herself to the other girls. And I think, sometimes girls could probably do a better job at being nice to each other. And just an example I give for that is we'll do the coastal walk, and I'm a Queenslander, so I like to say hello to everybody on the coastal walk, just morning. But I see these girls looking at Zoe, and they'll kind of look her up and down and won't say anything, keep their heads down. And she's like, she feels a bit judged. So while it is a really health conscious and active community, I do think there is room for improvement for people just to be a little bit more inclusive. And yes, it's a tiny percentage of those people, but, room for growth there, I reckon.
It's a good one, actually. What do you think they're scanning Zoe for?
Probably clothes or what they're wearing.
What activewear is she wearing? What
time.
trainers has she got on?
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a materialistic thing, girls comparing themselves. And, there is, like we're saying, there's lots of wealth in the suburb. And with that comes a bit of comparison. And it can be, we can all fall into the trap of the comparison game. So that's where it's highlighted a little bit for me.
Good ones, mate. I like those responses.
How do you feel? I mean, you're a fit guy, but do you ever go down there and you see these guys in the 20s?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time, mate. Yeah. There's and people you're sort of friendly with and from about the track. But I was saying this to one of my guests recently. I've had to mute some people on Instagram because I'm like, I just can't. I consider myself, fit and healthy, and I train quite a lot, eat all the right things, don't drink, sleep. But you still naturally compare yourself to some of the people you see out and about. So I found the muting strategy on Instagram quite good. No bad feeling or ill feeling toward these people that are making me feel that way. That's my own shit. And I own that. And I just go, I don't know, if I find myself in bed at night doing that little comparison thing before I try to go to bed, I'm just like, oh, this isn't healthy.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just mute them for a little bit, and so they're not in my psyche.
Exactly.
All the time.
Yeah, like I was saying, I think a bit of competition is healthy. And when you go down there and you're inspired by people, and that collective energy can raise you up. But when it becomes a problem is when comparison's the thief of joy, when it's impacting your mental health and you're setting unrealistic body goals for yourself based on other people down there. And you've got super fit, active, athletic people down there who are naturally genetically gifted. So you can't compare yourself to those guys. No. And that's where the mute button probably comes in handy.
Yeah. Just a quick word from me, guys. We're making some progress, Bondi podcast listeners. We're up to 450 followers on Spotify and 150 subscribers on YouTube. I would love to get both of those numbers closer to 500 across both platforms. So I've got a quick favor to ask. If you haven't, could you please quickly pause this episode, go and hit the subscribe and follow buttons on both platforms. It really helps with the show and ensures we can keep bringing quality guests an episode to you guys. Cheers. Nick, I'm going to say 3 words, and I want you to tell me which one gets you most excited.
Oh, I like it.
Actor, creator, podcaster.
Oh, this is a mental battle that I've been having for years. So thank you for opening the therapy session. It's such a funny one. My friend asked me on the weekend, are you still into acting? Are you still enjoying it? And I was like, look, it doesn't fire me up, but if a good script came across my desk, I'd probably be interested. And I got a good script across my desk yesterday. And when that happens, you imagine yourself in the role, you imagine yourself working overseas. And that, for me, is kind of like the pinnacle of what I could be doing creatively. But I guess the problem is that you don't get scripts like that every day. You don't get opportunities like that all the time. So with acting, it's such a waiting game, waiting for those moments, waiting for those opportunities, really, slugging it out. Whereas for creating and podcasting, that's something you can take action on every day. And as someone who, maybe it's my ADHD tendencies, I like to kind of move quickly and have instant feedback on things. So that's why creating and podcasting was quite alluring for me, because I can have instant results. I can put in effort today, post it tonight, and get that feedback. And maybe that's something I need to address. Like, I need that validation.
Whereas with acting, it must be much slower.
It's slower, and you also send out auditions and never hear anything back.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to get feedback on how you did. It's hard to track if you're growing. And a lot of the time, it doesn't matter how good your tape was, how good your scene was. You could be too tall for the role. You could be too blonde for the role, look too young, and you won't get called back. And they won't tell you those reasons as well. And I can't think of a different way for them to cast actors in roles. So I'm not suggesting any improvements to that. That's just kind of the brutal reality of the job.
Why won't they tell you you're too tall or too blonde for the role?
I think it's because there's too many people casting, and that's just kind of the expected norm of acting auditions now. I guess if you get further along, maybe you're in the shortlist of a bunch of people, they can give you specific feedback. But when it's broad in the early stages of auditioning, they cast a very big net. So they'll do a global search for actors, and they just physically can't reply to everybody.
Fair enough. Right, coming back to the question, which one?
Well, it changes every day.
Today.
For me, part of the reason I've been attracted to social media and podcasting is because at the back of my mind, my end goal has been to create a passive business that I don't have to rely on anybody. I can do for the rest of my life, and I can do anywhere in the world remotely. So for me, social media and podcasting ticks those boxes. And that's when I think about, when you get the journal out and we think about 5-10 year goals, it always comes back to that. I'd love to be on the Gold Coast somewhere or somewhere overseas, recording my podcast independently and putting it out. So when I do go back to the drawing board and kind of assess what's important to me, the creating and the podcasting is what really fires me up. But having said that, I still love acting. And I guess in my skits, I get an outlet to do that. I get to write something, perform it,
Scene.
Scene. Yeah, get really melodramatic. No one's at the house, but I'm still like, cut from the top. But yeah, no, it's I have fun with it. It's a bit sad sometimes. I'll be sitting at home on a Wednesday morning wearing a tea towel, just by myself in the living room.
Mate, we love those tea towel skits. No, we need more of them.
They are good fun. I do enjoy it.
How often do you do? So you talked about that little exercise you do there in your journal, sort of like a 5-year goals, 10-year goals. How often do you do that?
I tend to do that when I'm feeling a little bit out of control, and it's probably not I should probably do it before it gets to that point. But sometimes I'm guilty of slipping into a scarcity mindset or worrying about the future. It might be a slow week or a month of work, and I start to feel a bit out of control of my future. That's when I'll go back to the drawing board and pull out the journal and go through those goals, go through my values, and work out what I need to do to get where I want.
And how does that help?
It makes me realize that I've got nothing to worry about, I think. Yeah, whenever I pull it out, I realize, oh shit, maybe you write down your dream life in 5 years and you go, fuck, that's pretty much what I've got now. It kind of puts everything into perspective. Are you a fan of the journal?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, I've got one beside my bed. Don't use it like every day. Maybe once every 2 weeks, once every month. When I take a notion to write in it. I used to do it a lot more a couple of years ago when I was sort of going through some stuff, but I found that it was just more of a vehicle for negativity.
Oh, really?
So now I try to see it as like this positive thing. And, if I'm sitting there at the end of the day and, I've had a good day, I want to remind myself of, why has today been a good day?
Yeah.
And I sort of try to use it from a positive perspective now compared to probably how I was journaling 2 years ago.
To reinforce those positive habits. Yeah, that's a good one. I heard an interview with Matthew McConaughey recently, and he was saying
someone?
yeah, yeah, that one. Yeah, it's great. He was saying that a similar thing. On the good days, he would journal, so that when he was having bad days, he could go and look what was going right. Yeah, a good strategy I learned from a coach is if you are having those negative thoughts or you're having a bad day, the journal is a great way to accept them. So write out, this is fucked, I'm feeling jealous, blah, blah, blah. And that's okay. And I love that. And it just immediately brings an acceptance to that. And then you can rewrite the ending. So like feeling jealous, that's okay. I'm really happy with how this is going. And even if it's not completely factual, it starts to tell your subconscious that, things are moving.
It's okay to feel this way.
Yeah.
Nice, mate.
Yeah, I love the journal. It's when I definitely notice an increase in positivity and mood and drive and I guess acceptance when I have that regular journaling practice.
Nice, mate. It's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
Chief Nutrition have come on board as a sponsor. Chief Nutrition specialise in clean, healthy snacks that cut the crap. My personal favourite is the collagen protein powder. If you want to find out more about Chief Nutrition, listen to our episode with Veronica Larasova. And if you like what you hear, Bondi podcast listeners get 10% off all Chief products. Just follow the link in the show notes. Cheers. Look, Nick, so overall theme of, this chat tonight is modern dating, modern relationships. That's why I wanted to get you on specifically. You're across all of this stuff on your social media. You mentioned the tea towel skits, which are amazing. You do a lot of stuff, especially when you've got a tea towel on your head, on attachment style and attachment theory. When did you start looking into attachment theory and attachment styles?
It was only really when shit started to go south for me, when I started really digging into that relationship psychology.
So when was that?
In my late 20s, I'd say. So I'll give you the backstory. My parents broke up when I was 13, at the very formative age of 13. So because of that, I didn't realize this at the time, obviously, because I was 13, but inherited some anxious tendencies because, I had a massive fear of abandonment and also a little bit of avoidance stuff in there too, because my parents naturally through that process weren't really giving me the emotional intimacy that I needed. So that probably manifested in relationships in my 20s. And I was also always a bit of a girlfriend guy, sort of had girlfriends in my 20s. And then I had a long-term girlfriend from about 20 to 27, I'd say, maybe a bit later. And it was a solid relationship. There were a few, I'm sure I wasn't perfect in handling things, but it was enough to sort of get by. It wasn't enough to really to look at my behavior.
When you say, Nick, you weren't perfect at handling things, what do you mean by that?
I just mean being very reactive. So when we had a fight, I had no strategy to go to, and we didn't fight often, but in a disagreement, I didn't really have the toolkit that I needed to constructively move through that. So we became sort of really good mates, and that lasted for 6 or 7 years. And it wasn't until I got this job overseas I got an acting job overseas. So I was working in radio. I was doing the Triple M breakfast show in Sydney here. And at the same time, throughout that radio career, I was still pursuing my dreams as an actor. One year, I sort of got lucky. I booked a role on Neighbours, and then I booked a role on this show called Rain. And at the time, me and my girlfriend were watching Rain on Netflix. So it was just a complete wig out, watching the show and then auditioning for it. And, unlike all those other auditions where you hit send and you never hear anything back, for whatever reason, I heard back on this one and I booked the job just from the audition tape. So that was a real life-changing moment for me. I was able to quit my job in radio, and before I knew it, I was on a plane over to Toronto to start filming that series. And it was the first time that me and my girlfriend at the time were doing long distance. And we went into long distance completely ill-prepared, without any kind of strategy on how to deal with it. And I don't know if you've done long distance, but it can be very difficult. And unless you have a strategy on how you can catch up regularly and share that emotional connection, it's really easy to fall apart. At the time, I because I was so green and I didn't really have any acting experience, and I was plonked into this massive American show, I was just doing whatever I could to survive. So I let my guard down, and I, had a fling with a girl on the show.
Wow.
Cheated on my girlfriend back home. And the plan was to break up with her when I got home to Sydney. But she surprised me by coming over to wish me happy birthday. So I broke up with her over there, and
Did you tell her?
she found out.
How did she find out?
Girls just know. Yeah, she just realized, and I eventually came to the table and told her. But the lesson for me in that whole thing was that you really need to put up boundaries yourself before ever allowing things to get to a point where it might happen, if you know what I mean. You've got to, the cheating happens before the cheating. So the cheating might happen with a text or a drink with someone, or just letting your guard down to the point where you know that it's sort of breaking the boundaries.
Pretty close to the line.
Yeah.
And past the line a little bit. I better go back a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're going to have a drink with someone, you need to be aware that that's an environment which might create, a problem, or at least breach some boundaries. So yeah, that was a really traumatic experience. So I had to come home and move out, and it was a real rock bottom moment. So I went from this high of filming this show and being overseas working, and I had to come home, and basically my whole life fell apart because I had to move out of my house. I broke the person's heart who I cared about the most. And the thing about cheating is that it will hurt the person temporarily, but they'll move on, and she moved on and now she's happily married. But for the person who cheats, it torments you for so much longer than the other person. So you really are hurting yourself the most. And it took me a long, long time to reconcile with that and kind of find the reasons behind it.
So at what point did you hit rock bottom?
It was coming home and moving out. So we had we're living together, had a very established life, and I had to move out and restart. And
do you remember a moment?
Yeah, it was moving out of the apartment. So yeah, she gave me space and I did it by myself, and it was just a feeling of fuck, I really fucked this up. Like this couldn't have gone any worse. I do think, everything happens for a reason, and the relationship wasn't right, and wish it hadn't, but it got to a point where it exploded, and maybe that was a sabotaging thing by me. I didn't have the courage to face it head on, so I sort of did the easier option, the backdoor option.
Yeah.
Which, I'm not proud of, but in those moments, that's where the biggest growth happens. And back to your original question, that's when I dived into all of this advice and books and podcasts and everything I could find on relationships, and part of that was attachment theory.
So what was the initial step then? You've hit rock bottom. You've established there's a need to change. I need to do something about this. I don't want to be that guy. What was the first step?
I think in that process, so after the show, I went to LA for 6 months. So we broke up, went to LA, and I tried to make it as an actor over there, tried to get on some more shows. And that was, again, quite traumatic because I'd earned money from the show. I earned a decent paycheck from the show. But going over to LA, it was really hard for me to work because I didn't have a visa. So I'm there auditioning, just watching my bank balance go down. And it's bringing up a lot of that scarcity mindset that I had. So to sort of get through that, I leaned into meditation, I leaned into the journal, and I leaned into all of those mindful practices to get through that. And part of that was also a lot of self-growth around relationships as well. So that whole period was really pivotal for me. It was, at the rock bottom is where I did a lot of growth.
So it was a lot of DIY. It was a lot of just exploring yourself.
Yeah.
And attachment styles, that seems to be, obviously that's one of the things you touch on the most on your social media. Was that one of that gaining that understanding of attachment styles, was that an important part of that sort of self-growth?
It's a huge part of self-awareness, because once you can see where your patterning or where your behavior might stem from, it brings a lot of acceptance to it. So if I can say, I was, I had a fear of abandonment and I acted this certain way, you go, where does that come from? Oh yeah, parents broke up when I was 13. It helps you bring love to those parts of you, that inner child who's still feeling pain. And once you can heal that from the source, once you can go to that inner child and give it love, a lot of the time it starts to heal the problem. So if someone does have, an avoidant attachment style, part of the work that I'd recommend is going to the root of that cause. Maybe write it down, say, I've got this avoidant attachment style. I really struggle with emotional intimacy, and just write why. And then blah, 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 why. And keep writing why until you get to the real crux of the issue, to the core of it. And most of the time it's going to be back to your childhood, because that's when that imprinting occurs. And once you realize that, you can bring love to your inner child, give them a hug, like do a meditation and literally give them a hug. And it's amazing how it heals the problem from within.
That's beautiful, mate. Like you've mentioned, we've sort of touched on the different attachment styles. We're going to do some education right now. So Nick, what are the attachment styles?
Put me on the spot. Okay, so there's 4 attachment styles. We have secure. This is the one that everyone should aspire to. And this is usually someone who's had love from parents who've been very consistent and they've been reliable. So that the person with the secure attachment style is generally quite independent. They don't have a fear of rejection. They're not overly reliant on validation. So that's the first one, secure. The next would be anxious. This is someone whose parents might have been, they might have had a single parent, or their parent might have not been there for them as a kid. Basically, someone with an anxious attachment style is someone with a fear of abandonment. That's kind of the main one. So if your parents kind of had behavior as a kid that made you feel abandoned, that's going to imprint that patterning. The third one is avoidant. I just did a skit on this one actually, and I've got a lot of guy mates with this one, and it often stems from the parents not being emotionally available. A lot of the time it comes from dad. So if the dad might not be emotionally available for their son, which is pretty common, the son's going to have problems then being emotionally available for people in their life. So the avoidance is quite a common one. And the third is disorganized. So this one is when they show aspects of both this avoidant and anxious, and it's really quite a disorganized attachment style.
So when you started digging into this, what did you discover about yourself? Like where did you sit on that spectrum?
For me, yeah, things were coming up for anxious and avoidant.
All right.
Yeah.
Disorganized.
It was just it was a bit of a mess there for a little bit.
Right.
Nothing too crazy, but for me, what stands out, I guess, is a jealousy in my early 20s. So I would be in relationships where a girl, I can't remember any specific examples, but say that they're texting someone else, my fear of abandonment would come up, and that would manifest as me being quite jealous or overly reactive.
So what would you do in those scenarios?
I guess just get a bit irrational and controlling. I can't think of any specific examples, but that's how it was manifesting for me, through jealousy and slightly controlling behavior. And I guess just an irrational response to what I was faced with. So yeah, that was a big one for me. And
then the avoidance side?
The avoidance side was because my parents did split up, I was bouncing between both homes. So we spend the week with mum, and then on the weekends we go to dad's, every second weekends to go with dad. And because I had three siblings, a lot of the time the love and the attention kind of gets, diffused a little bit. So yeah, certainly no blame on my parents, but I guess, I didn't always receive the emotional intimacy, the emotional connection that I needed from my parents. And that caused me to withdraw a little bit and avoid from that. I was also someone, and what's the chicken and the egg here, but in my high school, like if there was ever a fight with mum, I'd just bury myself in the bedroom and, get on the computer, make some music or play the guitar and really avoid my feelings.
So you're at a point in your life here, Nick, where you've established you're this disorganized attachment style bit avoidant, bit anxious. How do you fix that? So I assume you aspire, as you mentioned, you aspire to be secure. How do you transition, I suppose, from this disorganized style to a more secure place?
For me, the big one is acceptance and awareness, self-awareness. So you firstly have to be aware that you're not behaving in the best way. And that might show up in relationships with irrational responses or conflict. You're not communicating with your partner. And then you've just got to be really honest with yourself. And for me, the journal has been pivotal for that. Just to get really honest, work out why it's happening, where it's coming from. And once you bring awareness to it, you can start to shine a light on things. And the magic piece of the puzzle is loving those parts of yourself. So going back to that child and really bringing love to that. I'll give you an example. I was in my 20s. I was dating a girl, and she was seeing this guy from work, and I just had that feeling you get. You like feel like he's stepping on my grass a little bit, and she's like, no, it's very platonic. It's just a male friend, but I still had that feeling. Nothing had happened, but instead of controlling that rationally, I'd lash out and I'd be quite suspicious, and it probably pushed her away. But anyway, after we broke up, she started seeing that person, and to her credit, she told me first. She came over and told me, and I remember at that time I felt clearly like I had two options, two ways I could go with this. I could react with anger and be like, "Fuck, I told you, I was right all along." But then at that time, in a way, it sort of validated my feelings, and I chose the calm response. And part of the reason why I was able to do that was in that breakup period, I was quite angry about her seeing that person, but I went inwards. I did a meditation. I went inwards, and against all of my instinct, I just imagined her and that guy together, and I imagined them hugging.
Oh, mate, that's like torture.
I went to a place. And I imagined me saying, look, I forgive you. Because I just realized it was tormenting me. But yeah, I realized that, look, this can torment you, but it's done now. So you may as well forgive the situation.
Yeah.
So I, in my mind, went deep down and forgave the person and brought love to the situation. And I feel like once you bring love to that pain and shine a light on it, it does a pretty good job at healing it.
I find myself in scenarios like that where I've been super angry at someone, and you hang on to that. But as you say, like, the only way that I've found is to try and let that go. And to let something like that go, you ultimately need to forgive that person or forgive yourself for something you might have done. But yeah, all comes back to forgiveness, right?
Big time. Yeah, it's really hard to do. But you're right. You've just got to not care about things that you don't have any control of.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, yeah, I mean, even if she did cheat or someone has cheated on you before, you've got to, it's really tricky to get there, but the most spiritual thing to do would be to forgive them for that and still love them. And it's only till you get to that place where you can truly move on.
Takes a while.
Yeah, it takes a lot of growth, and certainly not there all the time.
One thing that you've sort of touched on, Nick, is when I asked you to describe the attachment styles, you started with the parents. When I asked you to sort of explain where, or I didn't even ask you, you were very forthcoming with explaining where a lot of your stuff was coming from, and some of that's linked to parents as well. Is it always linked to parents, or? It's
mostly primary caregivers. So whoever that is for you, most of the time it is parents, I would say. I guess it could be school teachers maybe. It could also be siblings. For me, I do think being the youngest boy in my family, that impacted my maybe not the attachment style, but that definitely impacted my confidence and self-esteem. So yeah, I guess it's not only your parents, but those people around you in those early stages.
Have you had a chance to speak to your parents about it?
No, I don't think my mum would take that very well. You know what mums are like, it can be a little bit defensive. And mum was just doing her best. Like, she was a single mum who, acted in the best interest of the family. and made a really brave decision to leave dad. And while it wasn't great all the time, I'm sure she made the best decision with the information she had. But it's just hard to imagine the consequences that has on the kids. And to be fair, it's nothing too bad. It's just something that, you have to do a bit of work on growing up. Like we always had a roof on our house, and always were fed, which is an important thing. But yeah, a divorce in your teens can shake you up a little bit, especially at school too, because like you're comparing yourself to your friends who have these perfect families. I was lucky enough to go to a nice Catholic school in Brizzy, and you feel like the odd one out when you're coming from a broken home and you come in and you're staying at your friend's beautiful house. But I do think all of those things have given me such a great appreciation and a great drive to really get after it myself. And I don't think I would have that same passion and enthusiasm if I was given everything to me.
Yeah, the point you made there about not wanting to speak to your mum about it, they might just get defensive. Like, I can completely resonate with that as well. I did a lot of work myself over the last 2 years. Things have come up, and I've often asked myself, should I have that conversation with my parents? Should I explain to them that this thing that they did 20 or 30 years ago had all these crazy ramifications for my relationships later on in life? I'd love to have that conversation with them, but like you say, I think they would get defensive. And from me, it wouldn't be coming from an attacking position, but I think just maybe like a generational thing, like naturally they didn't have the tools that we have available now, and that awareness. And
such a good point. Yeah,
I wouldn't want to put them in that position where they think I'm accusing them or blaming them for something, because as you say, they were doing their best with what they had at the time. But it's a tough one. Like I've often thought about it, like, do I have that conversation with them?
Do you think it'd give you some closure or help you?
Nah, I don't think I need it anymore. Maybe a couple of years ago. I don't necessarily think I've made my peace with it, and I'm trying to plot my own way forward as best I can, given everything that's happened. But
yeah, that's a good place to be.
Yeah. And I just wouldn't want to put them in a position where they thought I was accusing them or blaming them for something, because I'm not. It would literally just be explaining, hey, this thing that happened nearly 30 years ago, that actually impacted me quite a lot.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. You're right. It's a generational thing. They simply just don't know if they would have the tools, but also we've done so much work to get to that point and to learn. They haven't done that, so I guess their reaction would be a little bit defensive. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I remember when me and my mum would clash a few years ago, I'd get so defensive and really want to resolve the argument and be right. But lately these days, it's more just like, there's going to be conflict. We don't have to sort it out. Mum's mum, I'm me, like whatever.
yeah,
So I think it's good to get to a point where you're not as triggered by your parents.
path of least resistance, right?
Yeah.
Fair enough. I want to talk about sort of different combinations of attachment styles getting together. It feels like two secures getting together, that's like the gold standard, right?
Yeah.
If two secures get together, can they still have issues?
I think so. Yeah. No one's secure 100% of the time.
Right.
I'd like to think me and Zoe, my girlfriend, are both secure, but we still have issues. We still get tired and grumpy and lash out at each other. So no one's immune from fights. I just think it gives you such a better, more safe platform when you are fighting, because when we fight, there's no fears about the other one leaving. We know that we're always going to be sweet, and I think that's the main thing. You can constructively argue without having that fear of abandonment, or you can argue while having that emotional intimacy. It's like having a very safe platform to have your relationship.
So what are the bad combinations then?
I just did my most popular reel would be on an avoidant versus an anxious, because both parties are living in fear. Really, they're not quite secure in the relationship. So one person's scared of the other person leaving, the other one is scared of emotional connection. So they're not communicating, they're not connecting at all. So there's a real struggle for them to have that emotional intimacy. So, in a lot of ways that relationship's quite, doomed. Both people are going to have to do a lot of work to get out of that.
But I've read that that's actually quite a popular relationship dynamic. For whatever reason, lots of anxious people end up in relationships with avoidance.
Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes we often like to replicate our wounds. So we find or seek people who are going to reaffirm and validate our wounds. So that might be the reason why.
And what about, would an avoidant ever get with an avoidant, or they would just completely miss each other?
I think if there's enough superficial attraction there, they might, but it's going to
There'll be lots of that around.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I just did a skit on narcissists with an avoidant.
Yeah.
And the thing about that is a narcissist is they like to be main character energy. So their whole game is to win the other person's approval, which suits the avoidant because they don't want to talk about their feelings at all. So they can just sit back while the narcissist takes center stage. And that's why at the beginning it's a very superficial but electric romance. And they run into problems when the narcissist stops getting that praise and validation from the avoidant. And then they say something, and usually with a narcissist, it's quite nasty. They might gaslight or do another emotionally manipulative thing. And the avoidant doesn't like that at all. So they're going to back away. But then they might get back together based on another superficial thing. So it can create this really toxic cycle. It's a whole bag of worms, mate.
Yeah. And what about two anxiouses? Would they ever?
Two anxiouses, I guess. Yeah, I mean, they're both carrying a fear of abandonment, right? So it would be quite an anxious match, as the name suggests.
Yeah.
I think all these matches are possible, and you go onto Hinge, and I'm sure you're going to see those matches pretty regularly. Yeah. The defining point is whether they'll last, and if they do, they're not doomed, but it's going to take both parties really coming to the table and doing the work on themselves.
Another thing that I've read, Nick, is if you're an anxious or you're an avoidant, the way to cure that, or one of the ways to sort of help that, is get into a relationship with a secure, because their secureness should hopefully, drip onto you.
Drip. Yeah, no, that's a good theory, provided the secure person's patient enough.
Is that the caveat?
I'd guess so. Yeah. I mean, I think the secure person would probably be quite aware of the other person's attachment style, just based on, they can feel it. They're secure in themselves, so they can see things objectively. And I guess they can model a type of behavior that is aspirational for the avoidant or the anxious. Everyone should just get involved with the secure.
Yeah. Have you seen that in practice at all?
I can't think of any examples.
No.
Do
you reckon when you and Zoe got together, you're both like pretty secure?
Yeah, we would, because we had a similar story in that we both had a long-term partner, and coming out of that, we identified some weaknesses and we did a lot of work on ourselves. So we dove into all the books, all the podcasts, and really educated ourselves on those things. She read Attached and claims that as a real source of knowledge for her.
That's where I got all this stuff from for this chat tonight.
Yeah, amazing book.
Yeah, it's great.
So we did that work to get to a place before, and we both advocate for doing this work before dating, or at least dating seriously. So if you want to attract someone who's secure, you really need to get to that position yourself, and there's really no substitute for doing the work yourself. So we both did the work, and we were able to attract each other, I guess, because we're at a similar place. And now we're very passionate about that, and we're going to do a course called the Modern Dating Survival Kit, and it's all about helping people get to that place before they go onto the dating market and wasting everyone's time.
Amazing, mate. So when's that coming out?
It's in the works. We're hoping to get it out this year, but probably more early next year, I'd say.
There's a lot of blokes around here that could definitely use that advice, mate.
Well, it's been great with Zoe because I've wanted to do it for a while, but with Zoe on board, it really brings that feminine dynamic, the women's perspective. Yeah. 100%. So that'll be great, and something that I'm excited to do together as well.
Nice, mate. When did you start posting on social media about attachment styles?
Well, I was lucky during COVID. I was one of those people who got on TikTok, and the best thing about that was none of your Instagram audience was on TikTok. So you really had this freedom to express yourself and play. So I started doing acting skits, and then I did a few dating skits, and I noticed that the dating ones went really well. Not only were they received well, but I really enjoyed writing them as well. I think probably 10 skits in, once I started posting on Instagram, I honestly can't remember why I dived into the attachment one to begin with, but I noticed there was such interest in that. And it's just, there's so many different avenues you can take it. And whenever I'd put one up, people would request different combinations. So it just spawned from there, and it kind of exploded. And I did that one I just talked about, Anxious Avoidant. That went up to something like 12 million views, and that was one of the early ones. And I got something like 55,000 followers from that one reel. So I was like, there's something here. So as much as I don't like to do the same one every time, it's something that I like to go back to whenever it's been a month without doing one.
Yeah, I think people just want to understand themselves better. Like when I look at your skits and your reels, like some of them hit home pretty hard. Like I laugh at them, like, so, they're entertaining. You make a complex issue seem very easy, but some of them fucking hit home, and especially the ones with the avoidant. Because if I look at, Chris in his 20s, early 30s, oh, big time avoidant. And I look, I it's in your face. I'm holding my phone like that, and I'm like, yep, that was fucking me. And I look back at some of the shit I did when I was in my avoidant era, and things I'm not too proud of. So that's why it can be quite confronting as well. But I think at the end of the day, people just want to try and understand themselves a little bit better.
Were there can you think of any specific examples which gotcha, which you saw and like, fuck, that reminds me of that time?
Just like fucking anytime the avoidance, anytime someone wants to just get too close to the avoidant, and you just that just constant trying to keep them at arm's length. That was me. Big time. Couldn't let anyone in. Didn't want to let anyone in.
Yeah.
Lone wolf kind of thing.
Which is so common for blokes.
Yeah.
It's so common for guys. Yeah, I get a lot of feedback from that. And that's been one of the most rewarding things, is my mates coming up and going, fuck, that was a bit too close to home.
Yeah.
And you're like, shit, that's... Because it's something you do in the privacy of your home. And sometimes you forget that people are actually watching it, because numbers on a screen are so abstract. So when friends come up and go, oh, that actually helped me. It's like, fuck, that feels pretty good. Yeah. But no, thanks you for saying that. I'm not, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, but I do think I have a bit of an ability to break down these things into concise, short scripts. And once you thread humor into that, it's so inviting, and it just opens up everyone to watch it. And it also is such a great way to deliver a message. There's something about the way humor can connect with people is pretty amazing.
100%, completely agree. And it's not just attachment theory you do in your skits and reels, Nick. It's other things as well, which I want to get into now, to be honest with you. So what I want to do now is really get into some of those terms that are everywhere in modern dating and modern relationships today, but 10 years ago you wouldn't have heard of these things. So first one I want to talk about is ghosting. Have you ever been ghosted?
I have.
Or have you ever ghosted someone?
I'm not proud of it, but I'm sure I have, but not deliberately. I have been the victim of a ghosting or two, which sucks.
Was this after you'd done like all the work on yourself? Was it
probably in the thick of it, I'd say.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, probably in the thick
that wouldn't
of
have
it.
helped.
Yeah, it did help. Maybe it's what led me to some serious choices. But yeah, it's not fun. It's because at the end of the day, in a relationship or in dating, you just want to know where you stand. So if someone ghosts you without an explanation, it's a pretty harsh thing to do. And then for someone with anxious tendencies or patterning, it's going to trigger some trauma, because they're abandoning you, right? So yeah, the ghosting's not fun. When dating, I always used to make a real effort to, if I don't want things to continue, just to explain why, even if it can be quite hurtful. Obviously it's not going to be mean, but just be clear to them, because then they have the information, they're able to move on. So ghosting really denies people of their ability to move on. And that's why it's really tricky. And, it's such a theme of dating these days, because people have so much choice. there's an abundance of choice on the apps. We live in a place where there's so many young single people. So if they're talking to 10 people at once, their likelihood of ghosting you is pretty high. Have you been ghosted?
Oh yeah, I have, but I think I did my fair share in my 20s, so I think it's just kind of balancing the scales a little bit. Yeah, a bit of karma. Yeah. But like over the last couple of years, as I said, I didn't actually mention this, but I had my rock bottom moment too at the end of 2022. Had a massive panic attack, and that was sort of the catalyst for me getting my shit together. But from that point onwards, no ghosting. Like yourself, made a conscious effort to explain to the person.
Yeah. What steps? So when you had that rock bottom, how did that process look for you in terms of working on yourself?
I started working with a kinesiologist. Yeah. I had actually been working with a kinesiologist toward the end of 2022, and then just before New Year's, after Christmas, just had this panic attack. Lots came up. It blew up my previous relationship. But I knew at that point, I was just getting started. I was like, oh shit, no, there's some stuff that needs to come up and out, and I need to address head on because I've been suppressing it for so long. So continued to work with the kinesiologist, and that really, really helped. I don't know if you've dabbled in kinesiology.
I've done it once. Yeah. It's not something I've done much though.
Yeah, it's good.
I found it really helpful.
Yeah, I found it really, really helpful. Yeah, and also meditation.
Yep.
Like yourself. So, I think April 2023, so about 4 months after the panic attack, went up to Bondi Meditation Center, did the Learn to Meditate 4-day course.
Nice.
Been meditating twice a day ever since.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think it's just really, really helped. So yeah, twice a day, 20 minutes each.
Oh, mate, that's great.
Yeah, and I think it's just really, really.
Yeah, and that's Vedic meditation.
Well. Yeah, Vedic meditation.
Yeah, twice a day is great. Do you notice it when you don't do it?
Yeah, I think there's sometimes I would maybe only do it once a day.
Yep.
And I can feel myself in the afternoon getting a bit angsty.
Yeah, for me, it's just like the baseline head noise, or you're right, it's just like a feeling of angst. You're not quite as clear as before. And it's interesting, like I just went through a period of a couple of weeks of not doing it at all, just fell out of the habit. And
sorry, you do Vedic as well?
Yeah, I do Vedic as well. And then after a few weeks of not doing it, you actually forget about it, and that baseline anxiety or angst becomes the norm. So it's only the last couple of days where I've made a real effort to get back into it, and it's just night and day how you feel, to the point where like when I'm in it, I'm like, fuck, I need to do this every day. Yeah. It is so good for your mindset and for your nervous system. Just calms everything down.
Yeah. Are you trying to grow your business or brand but often find there aren't enough hours in the week? Have you considered hiring a virtual assistant to help with all those tasks that you don't want to do that could easily be delegated? I'm talking about admin, accounting, digital marketing, social media, and much, much more. Well, our show sponsors Remote provide businesses, entrepreneurs, and social media influencers with the top virtual assistant talent in the Philippines. If you're curious but still sitting on the fence, why not use the referral code BONDI to trial a virtual assistant for 2 weeks for absolutely free. That's 2 weeks, absolutely free. All you have to do is go to the website www.remote.com.au/contact, enter your details, enter the referral code BONDI, and someone from Remote will be in touch. I've added the link to the Remote website in the Instagram bio, and there's also a link in the show notes. And if you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, please get in touch with us over Instagram. Cheers. So Nick, just coming back to the ghosting, why do you think people do it?
I think they're scared of maybe hurting people's feelings. They're scared of being honest. I honestly think when I got ghosted, I felt like the person was a coward. I was like, just tell me. We're all adults. We can handle the truth. It's easier to just shoot a quick text, because otherwise you're just leaving that person on the string, and it's really difficult for them to move on. So I think it's just, a lack of, conscientiousness, and it is a little bit of a mean thing to do. There's really no excuses for ghosting, I reckon.
No. I've had the slow ghost. No, sorry. That scenario where you think you're being ghosted, but then they leave it like 4 or 5 days, and then they send that message.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not really a slow ghost, but it's like kind of like the slow. What do you call that?
Yeah, that's called breadcrumbing.
Is it?
Yeah, that's breadcrumbing, where you sort of give enough attention, enough crumbs to someone to keep them on the hook.
Yeah.
But it's an emotionally manipulative way to control the situation. So you just give someone enough, but not enough, and it keeps them interested. But you probably the person has no intention of continuing anything.
Fair enough. Right, Nick, gaslighting. This is a big one. What's gaslighting?
So this is an emotionally manipulative tactic used by people to control them, and it's all about denying their reality. So if you have a fight and someone gaslights you, they often tell you things that didn't happen. They might take things out of context, and it's all about denying their truth. So it drives you crazy because you have your version of events, but someone who's gaslighting you is telling you that it happened differently, or they're blaming you for something that didn't happen, or they're blaming you for their own shit. But it's a really emotionally manipulative tactic.
Can you give an example?
So in an argument, gaslighting. So say there's an argument. Gaslighting could be when the partner says, "Oh, stop taking everything so seriously," or "Can you just relax? Like, you're always so angry," even when the other person's being quite calm.
Okay.
So they're intentionally kind of escalating the situation. Another example would be flat out lying about something, or
that didn't happen.
yeah. It's all about denying that person's truth. And so when someone's telling you something that didn't happen, it really escalates the situation.
So why do people do that?
A lot of the time people don't know they're doing it. It might be, something they've done for years as a way to control the argument. It's a big one for narcissists. Narcissists love gaslighting. So that's their way to belittle the person and try and manipulate them emotionally. As an example, the narcissist might say things like, you overreact at the littlest things, like you're completely blowing this out of proportion, when the person actually has a claim to feel like they've been hard done by. So they twist the truth in their favor to try and win the argument.
And is it linked, if we could link that back to attachment styles, is there a certain attachment, you mentioned narcissists, is there a certain attachment style that's more prone to gaslighting?
I don't think so. Not that I know of. I
Just
think
more of a narcissistic personality trait?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think anyone can use it. It's probably just an immature thing to do. It's very inflammatory for conflict. It's certainly not a constructive way to argue at all.
Do you think it's being overused at the minute?
It's definitely a hot term, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it is. Yeah, there's especially with the election, I've read a lot of comments. Everyone's gaslighting them, and it probably doesn't fit the actual definition of that. So it's definitely the hot term at the moment. Whether or not it's actually gaslighting is another thing, but I guess the more we bring attention to it, the better. People can start to realize what it is. But if it's being used incorrectly, it probably doesn't help around.
The ick.
The ick, yeah.
Why do people get the ick over the littlest things?
I have a theory about this. So the ick, for those who are wondering what the hell we're talking about, is when you're dating someone, or you could be in a relationship with them, and something superficial they do really rubs them the wrong way and turns them off. It could be something as little as they're sitting at a stool and their feet aren't touching the ground. And that's enough to give someone the ick. It's all fun and jokes, but I actually think the reason why some people get the ick is because they're afraid of emotional connection. So they might have avoidant patterning, and they're using the ick as a self-sabotage thing. So they're using the ick as an excuse to not see that person anymore. Exactly. Yeah. So things might be going along well, and their subconscious is looking for ways to protect themselves, to stay safe and not dive into emotional intimacy. So they might see something stupid like the feet not touching the ground and be like, "Oh, it's an ick. I'm out." Tell the girlfriends I'm out. That's an ick. There was actually a really good example of it on About You. It's About You, I think it's called, which is a new Kristen Bell series on Netflix. She gets the ick, and that was exactly
What does she
the
get the ick
reason.
over?
It was time for him to meet her parents, and he was wearing like a really daggy Christmas sweater, or he didn't have shoes on or something. And he took her outside, and he was like, "Look, I know this is a lot for you. I know you've got some trauma, but I'm here for you. And once you get over this stupid, superficial ick, I'll always be here for you, and we'll move on." And that was enough for her to feel safe. So yeah, kind of an avoidant thing, I think. But most of the time it's used, it's a bit of fun and games. But I do think, bring awareness to what is actually causing the ick.
So if you're an avoidant, then Nick, and you are dating someone or you're in a relationship with someone that you do quite like, but you feel those icky feelings coming on, or you start to notice little icky things, but you have enough self-awareness to know kind of what's going on, how do you get over the ick to preserve the sanctity of the relationship?
Yeah, I think you've got
I'm
to...
asking for a friend. No, I'm only joking.
What's the ick? Tell me. You got to work out if it's a deal breaker, if it's an actual red flag, or if it's just something superficial that you can get over. Because at the end of the day, no relationship's going to be perfect. We've all got to compromise a little bit, and you're probably going to have to compromise on that ick. So yeah, go back to, is this an actual issue, or is this just me projecting some of my own shit, and work out if you can live with it. You got to compromise, right? Like, I've never met anybody who has a perfect relationship. Everyone is flawed, and that's what makes us human. So the sooner you can get on board with that, the sooner you're going to be able to create a fulfilling life with your partner. It took me a while to get there, for sure. I think in your 20s, you're looking for that perfect person. But once you realize that no one's perfect, and that's what actually makes it beautiful.
That's something that the avoidants go after, right? They have this idea that there is the one or this perfect person out there for them. So if they get the ick, they're going to, probably bail at the first sign of danger.
100%. Yeah, they're looking for someone, some like savior complex who's going to heal their pain.
Yeah.
So as soon as that person shows a weakness, they're going to bail.
Oh, she's not the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gone.
When in reality, they've got to heal that from within first, and realize that they're safe and whole without someone. And as soon as they feel that, 100% they're going to attract someone on that same level. And that's a huge one as well. Just me and Zoe talk about this a lot. Once you're safe and feeling whole and you love yourself, you're going to attract someone who's on that same level. So the best way to attract someone is actually to do the work on yourself and get to that point where you're not actively looking for anyone, but you're walking down the road and you're emitting an energy and a frequency that's attracting people to you.
So you need to decide basically whether it's an ick or whether it's an actual red flag.
Yes.
That moves us on quite nicely, Nick. Well played. To red flags.
Segue. I like it.
Why do people ignore red flags in relationships and when dating people?
It's a tricky one. I think if someone's really desperate to be in a relationship, or they think
this is my last chance.
Yeah,
maybe,
totally. Or maybe they're not. There's low self-esteem within themselves. They're going to maybe latch on to someone to sort of, because they feel like they're going to heal them, and so that allows them to gloss over any red flags, whereas they should see them objectively. It can also be a sign of a manipulative partner, where they see the red flags but they're too scared to say anything. Thinking back to attachment styles, it might even be someone with anxious patterning, because they've got this massive fear of abandonment, so they'd rather stay with that person than risk being alone. So they'll gloss over those red flags. Doesn't matter what it is.
Why do some people find red flags attractive?
Yes, that's such a good one. It's
because it happens, right?
Yeah.
She's got daddy issues. I'm straight.
100%, yeah, and we've all seen those. We've all been friends with the girls who go after the bad boy.
Yeah,
they're attracted to the person who treats them.
And
like
then
shit.
the fuck boy fucks them over, and they're surprised.
Yeah, my theory on that is they might be repeating some childhood patterning as well. So say like their father figure wasn't a great dad, or they might have had a bad experience with men growing up. they're naturally just repeating those patterns, and so they'll often seek men who are going to be similar to their father, and that's where the bad boy mentality comes in. But it also goes back to like an energy thing, I think, where we're attracted to people who show no interest in us, or rather, who are so sort of complete on their own. Sometimes that's magnetic and attractive. So a girl might go after that guy because he's cool and he doesn't show her any interest. He's happy on his own or happy in other people, and for whatever reason, that's attractive to her.
How do people then break these cycles and patterns that they're caught in?
Yeah, I think it goes back to secure dating and conscious dating. It comes back to being really self-aware. The more you can read, the more you can listen to, and start to pick up on these things you might be doing. Because a lot of the time people are unconscious, so they're not familiar with all these things that they're doing. And like you and I, sometimes it takes a massive rock bottom to actually do the inner work.
Yeah.
Because if you're just rolling through and things are good, but maybe not great,
Not terrible, yeah.
it's really hard for those things to come to the surface. Yeah. For guys, yeah, you've really just got to do the self work and get in there, and don't be scared to shine a light on some things that happen when you're a kid or what happened with your parents, and you'll find some things that come up, and once you can bring light to that, it's gonna help you big time.
Those rock bottoms are a powerful catalyst for change.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Like people say that more growth happens in the hard times, and that's just such a good example of that. Because when things are going good, you have no impetus to check in or to look at what's going wrong. But when you're literally forced to do it, there's no better time. Like when you're up against
there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah,
Backed into the corner.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which brings up a good question about how do you find those moments of growth outside of rock bottoms?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think your friendship group can be a good influence. If you have people that you're close to and you have a bit of you have respect for, and they're role modeling good behaviors, it might, oh, what's that all about? Curiosity might get the better of you, and you might lean into something. Again, going back to the point on meditation, I think that curiosity from some people, I think living in a place like this as well, to be honest with you, there's a lot of people who are, one of their fucking hobbies is self-development, right? Yeah, what are you into? I'm into self-development. All right, okay. And they just get into it. Yeah. They could be in a pretty good place, but they just continue chipping away.
Yeah. What about the podcast? Has that opened your eyes to different areas of growth?
Yeah. I would say the podcast coupled with the meditation has led me to go alcohol free.
Okay.
For 400 days now.
Oh, awesome.
Not had a sip.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, it was interesting. Some of those early episodes of the podcast, a theme that was constantly coming through was alcohol. And I'd never had an issue with alcohol. I don't have like addictive tendencies or anything like that. But it just kept coming through. And it was at a time of my life where I started doing that 75 hard challenge.
Yep.
And as part of that challenge, you go alcohol free. So I did the 75 days, and I think just through having some really good conversations with guests, the Vedic meditation as well, I've been happy to continually go alcohol free.
Oh, good on you, man. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, I actually had a similar experience on the podcast where, for whatever reason, had a few guests on who were alcohol free, and really got me thinking. And I think you and I are a similar age, and once the older I get, especially on birthdays, it almost feels like alcohol becomes a bit of a self-sabotage thing. We have such ambitious goals, and once you're older, you start thinking about family and building that next chapter. And it really does feel like alcohol becomes sabotaging to that, almost in an irresponsible way. It's like, fuck, what am I doing? Like thinking of all these lofty goals, but then drinking on the weekend,
writing yourself off on a Sunday
doesn't quite add up.
Yeah. One of the good things about the podcast that's kind of linked to that is, like, I do a lot of the admin for a podcast on a Sunday because I work 9 to 5. I've got like a corporate job, 5 days a week, 9 to 5. I don't get a lot of spare time to do the podcast. So Sunday's like my day. And I want to, if I'm a little bit dusty, if I'm even like 10% off it, the prep won't be as good. I'll feel a bit of guilt because I know I'm half-arsing it. So just having that clear mindset and clear head on a Sunday to get the podcast admin done. Like,
Oh, good on you.
really
Yeah.
helps as well. And that's a big driver at the minute. Like, I'm on 400 days. I never set out to do 400 days. I set out to do 75 and then just built it from there. 100, 150, 200. And it's interesting.
Flying. Have you noticed any difficult periods or difficult days?
Yeah, so this is something that I think Chris Williamson talks about in his podcast, and I think he's cut down big time on his drinking as well. And a lot of people go through this journey. You go through this kind of like lonely period, where you're sort of drifting away from that old friendship group that's centered around drinking and going out, and you've not found your new tribe yet.
Yeah, right.
So you're kind of in that in-between period where you don't want to go to the pub or you don't want to go to Ravisi's on a Saturday night because you get nothing out of it, but you've not found that new friendship circle that are a bit more aligned on your current values and where you want to go and your aspirations. And that takes some time. And I've come out the other end now and I've got good people around me, really good people around me. But it was lonely for a period. And I had to sit in that loneliness because it would have been very easy to go back to the safe old crowd who are doing the same thing every single weekend, writing themselves off on a Friday and Saturday night, dying on a Sunday, but completely not at it on a Monday and Tuesday, maybe only starting to feel better on a Wednesday, then do it all again.
Yeah.
I just needed to break that cycle.
Yeah.
I got nothing out of that cycle. Toward the end, I was just like, I'm not even enjoying this anymore.
You feel like a real lack of connection because you're at the pub and after 2 or 3 beers, the conversation goes to shit anyway.
Yeah.
I've been in those situations where you walk away and you're like, fuck, I don't feel good after that.
No.
I don't feel inspired. I don't really, for me, it's been something that I've grown out of a little bit. I still love catching up with my mates for beers occasionally, but it's certainly not something I need to do every weekend. I get so much more joy out of wake up in the morning, going have an ice bath or going to the gym. You feel mentally so much better, but also like you're actually on top of your life and doing good things. But you're right, I can imagine that adjustment period being quite lonely.
It is. But you've got to just sit in it and it passes. And that's what people kept saying. Or, when I was listening to podcasts about it and resonating with what people were saying, it passes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I've gone through it. It's tough, but I'm glad I've gone through it. What really helps as well, because I still liked going out and socializing with friends, the zero alcohol beers, like heaps normal. Like I've been just getting around them for well over a year now. And if I do want to go to a social event with my friends where everyone else is drinking, but I don't want to feel like a freak standing there drinking water, just those heaps normal beers, mate. They're
tasty as well.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. They sponsored an episode
did they?
Recently. Yeah,
That's cool.
It's really good.
I've been drinking this non-alcoholic wine called Non.
Oh yeah, you enjoy drinking it in one of the episodes, yeah.
Yeah. And the same thing. The cool thing about that is you get that reward and that treat of having a drink, but you don't actually need the alcohol. No. It's more just having a tasty drink and you're drinking out of a wine glass and it feels like an elevated moment. But, during the week, you don't really want to go to, especially now that I'm tracking everything.
Yeah.
As you are by the looks of it. Yeah. You don't want to sabotage your sleep with a drink. So that non-alcoholic is just the best substitute ever.
Yeah. If it looks like a beer or a wine, smells like a beer or a wine, tastes like a beer or a wine, for all intents and purposes, it's in that social situation, you forget that you're not you forget that you're not drinking alcohol.
And do you also find that I feel like my best work at the pub is, the first, second or third drink before I get drunk?
Yeah.
When I'm drunk, my chat goes to shit. And I'm just by the fifth, I'm just completely useless.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing the non-alcoholic, I've actually got more to offer.
Yeah.
So it's completely flipping the mindset.
Yeah. Interesting, mate.
And
you enjoy drinking that non-alcoholic wine on the podcast recently. Are you doing a non-alcoholic thing at the minute, or are you just silly seasons on the horizon?
Yeah, I'm really on the edge of committing to a decent chunk.
Yeah.
It is a bit of a tricky time of the year, but at the same time, my thinking is that if I can't do it here, I'm never going to be able to do it. Like, this is a really good chance over Christmas to try the non-alcoholic thing.
So that's what I did last year.
Did you?
I started the 75 days mid-October, and there's never going to be a good time to do it. And that was like, right, that's going to be wedding season, festival season, my birthday, Christmas and New Year's. If I can get through all that,
Yep.
I'm gonna be okay.
Winter will be a breeze.
So
Yeah.
just let that sink in, mate.
Yeah, I might take a leaf out of your book. I do feel like it. I'm just so excited about work and all these things at the moment. And when I do that balance equation, like drinking, it just does the sacrifice you make for it really doesn't make any sense, and it's irresponsible and it's sabotaging to the dreams that I have. So I might take a leaf out of your book there.
It's the cost benefit analysis. Like the equation was just too one way. Like the cost weren't the cost the days after weren't worth the benefits of and look, in my 20s, those benefits far outweighed the cost.
Yeah.
But now the scales have just tipped. And
exactly, because in your 20s, your priorities are different. You're out there to meet people. You're keen to see the world. Your fun is more of a preference for you. But now it just doesn't quite make sense. I did a decent chunk in May this year, and what I noticed the most was Tuesday mornings. So I remember vividly, I was sitting in the car park at the gym, and there was no hesitation between finishing the gym and going to do something else, which sounds ridiculous, but it was just this automatic momentum that I had in the morning. I'm like, I reckon that's 100% the alcohol thing. Like, it's a very consistent energy throughout the week.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Definitely. Right, mate, let's back to the modern dating. It was a nice little segue.
Decent little detour there.
I enjoyed that. One thing that I've found as I've got older, and I don't know if you found this as well, the older I got, the more particular I got, the more non-negotiables were on my list, my list got longer as well in terms of things I was looking for in a partner. I don't know if you've had this, but is that sort of a healthy approach in today's dating environment?
I think it's healthy. Yeah. I think that's a very constructive approach, and you can get really specific about the person you want to attract. I guess get really specific, but then make allowances for more superficial things on that. I've got a mate, Thomas Melicelli, who I've had on my podcast. He got so granular with the woman that he wanted to attract that his current partner matches everything to a T.
No way.
Yeah, and it's a part of the manifesting process.
Yeah.
So you write everything down, and then you believe that it's already happening, and that person comes into your life. For me, I think naturally in dating, if you get to your 30s, you've had enough evidence to work out what you want, who's right for you, who's not right for you. For me, it's kind of like the analogy, say a submarine shoots off a torpedo. That torpedo never really goes straight. It's kind of using sonar to self-correct. And that's kind of like us in dating.
Yeah.
We go for the brunette. This is superficial. We go for the brunette, not right for me. Go for the blonde. And you're kind of going to extremes until you find that person in the middle. So yeah, I think it's healthy to be very specific. And I would encourage people to write down their perfect person and really do the energy and the manifesting work to attract that person. But having said that don't be so particular where you're going to let superficial things ruin that for you.
Yeah. Did you find yourself doing something similar?
Yeah, to the point with Zoe, I was attracted to the British accent. So I wrote down, blonde, sexy British accent or something, and
that was it. Just 2 bullet points. Tick.
Don't I sound like a dick? No, I mean, I've scored with Zoe, which is incredibly intelligent and funny, and those were definitely high up on my list as well.
Nice, mate. More generally speaking, do you think it's harder to date and start a relationship today compared to, say, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I've been off the market for nearly 2 years now, but in that period, I'd almost given up when I first met Zoe. I was like, this is too much drama. There's too many games. And I don't know if you can relate to this, but the dating market at the moment, there's so many games being played. Things like ghosting. People are so scared to reveal their feelings about someone.
How long should I wait to text him back? Oh, he waited 2.5 hours. I'm going to wait 3. Shit 100%, like that.
Yeah. And I just think that's such a barrier to actual meaningful connection. So what me and Zoe did, we just put our balls on the line straight away and told each other how we felt. And when there's no games like that, you can just rapidly move on. So that aspect of games, I think, makes modern dating really difficult. the other thing we touched on before is the abundance of choice. People have so many options now. So there's 5 or 6 apps they can jump on.
Swipe culture.
You swipe culture, jump on Raya, and there's Swedish supermodels or American football players that people can see. And so people always feel like there's a better option. So how are you going to settle down if you always feel like there's a better option? So at some point, people just need to accept what's in front of them and realize that they're going to have to make compromises and settle down. But
do you think the majority are too far gone at this stage, Nick? Like in terms of that swipe culture, those apps, that grass is always greener mindset that seems to have crept in over the last 5 years?
I think a positive move has been the run club culture and the swim club culture. And we might have a disproportionate view of that living here in Bondi, but it seems like a lot of people are opting for those things instead of the dating apps these days, which I think is a great move because you're immediately aligning yourself with someone with similar values. It's a much better deal than trying to find someone at Ravisi's on the dance floor at 12 a.m. So hopefully that is a step in the right direction, these run clubs and swim clubs.
Completely agree, mate.
Yeah, I don't know. I've sort of got off the dating market before those were a thing. But I'm also a massive advocate for finding your partner in natural environments as well. So if you're someone who likes to work from a cafe, just keep your perception open when you're at the cafe, and maybe you'll run into that person there, or maybe at the ice bath or at the gym. Find people who have similar values to you, who are engaging in similar activities, and that's such a better way to do it than dating apps.
Yeah. One thing, and again, just kind of circling back on your point about like no games. I've listened to some of your and Zoe's podcasts, and that's one of the things you said from the very start. Like there was no games. Again, that nearly threw me. So the girl that I'm currently dating, we met at an event one Friday night, and then the very next morning she'd messaged me, "Hey, great to meet you last night. We should do something this week." And it completely threw me because like I think the previous girls that had sort of been dating before I'd met her, quite a few games thrown in there, and it was just so refreshing to have that person be like, "Hey, I'm interested in you. We should catch up to see if there's, a little bit more to this."
Especially the girl, right? Because traditionally the girl has to wait for the first move.
But I loved it. I loved her taking like that first step.
Yeah.
It's a ballsy move, and I was like, yeah. But by her doing that, she's standing out from the pack already there, which I liked.
Yeah, because it shows a level of security for her to do that. She's not worried about games or rejection. Yeah. She's putting herself out there, even if it's going to
am I going to come across as too keen? Like, no, she messaged me like straight up the next morning. "Hey, good to meet you last night. Let's do it again."
Because immediately you know where you stand. 100%. That makes you secure, she's secure, and you can just start to converse like normal people, not knowing that the other person is not seeing anyone else or whatever it might be. Yeah, that's a massive one. The other thing, Zoe was a similar thing. So I added her first, technically, but I didn't say anything because I wanted to let it stew for a few days before.
Playing games, Nick. Playing games, mate.
Shit, maybe you're right. I was actually on a golf weekend and I wanted to be at home to work my magic. But she beat me to the punch and she slid into my DMs and was like, "Sorry, have we met?" And it was just enough to sort of catch me off guard and dive in, and
knowing full well you'd never met before.
Yeah. Women taking the first step is a good thing, I reckon.
Yeah.
Or just whoever, just
more
whatever it feels like.
Yeah. Happy days. How is being in a relationship with Nick Slater different today than it was to Nick Slater in his 20s?
I definitely think I'm more educated and conscious and self-aware. And I do think more rational in arguments. So say back in the day, we might have had an argument and I'd be reactive. I might have taken things personally. There might have been a spot of jealousy in there. But now I know, most of the time have the tools to be able to have conscious communication. That's been a massive one for me. There's a book by a great friend of mine called Jem Fuller called Conscious Communication. And that's been a really, really insightful read for me.
So what's conscious communication?
I guess conscious is being self-aware and making sure that whenever you do engage in a conflict, that you're doing it from a constructive point of view. So yeah, I mean, conflict isn't always bad. Sometimes it's necessary for the relationship. Sometimes you need to have a serious discussion, but you want to do it from a point where you're actively working towards something. You're not just throwing knives at each other. So I guess that's conscious communication, being aware of the other person's, limiting beliefs, your limiting beliefs, and approaching everything from a more aware perspective. Yeah, the 20-year-old Nick definitely didn't have those tools in his toolkit, and I do think it takes men a lot longer to grow up. So I really feel like I've reached my full maturity around the age of 30. In the 20s, you're still so driven by ego, and I definitely felt that, and that's probably one of the reasons why that relationship didn't work out for me. I mean, in my 20s, I was always I used my self-worth my self-worth was based a lot on my appearance and my physical attributes. So when
do you think that comes from Nick, like sort of coming up in a sporting background where I think you played a lot of rugby when you were younger, so you'd been in a lot of rugby changing rooms where it's very alpha kind of atmosphere, right?
Yeah, and also acting, I'd say. Acting's, obviously quite appearance focused. And so in a relationship, or when that relationship broke down, I think part of the reason why I strayed was because someone showed interest in me in that, and I used my body as validation, and that was enough for me. And yeah, so just things like that I'm aware of now, and I can look out for, and I can stop before they're even a thought in my head. But you have to go through those things to work it all out, don't you?
Final question for me tonight, mate. What words of advice would you give late 20s Nick, or was it in his 30s, who hit that rock bottom point after that relationship broke down?
I would give some love to that person, and I'd say, look, mate, this is fucked. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. Things aren't great. You've fucked up. But you can come out of this. You can do the work. You can apologize and make amends with that person. And you're not a bad person for doing those things. But ultimately, things will get better. So just know that things are going to be okay. Put your head down, do the work, and things will always work out.
Beautiful, mate. That's a great place to leave it. Thank you very much, Nick. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, brother.